welcome to our first inaugural social system mapping sumApp Tech Talk session on January 27th, 2020. This is, I'm Christine Capra, with the co-founder of Greater Than the Sum and sumApp, with my spouse and partner Tim Hansen, who would usually be with us on these Tech Talks, but unfortunately today he had a meeting he could not get out of, so he won't be with us. We will miss him. This is the third of our first round of our new structure for our community practice sessions. Last year, what we did was, for about a half a year, we did an on-ramp session. Oops, I did that wrong. Which is an introductory thing every 2 weeks. Now we're breaking it up some more, so that will continue to happen. It'll be once a month on the second Mondays. The next one will be February 10th. In that session, we'll look at maps and we'll get some high-level introductory basic questions answered. The third Monday of the month, we go into deeper discussions about some of the things that come up in the intro and the things that practitioners are grappling with. The next one will be on February 17th. And then today is the fourth Monday of the month, and we will have Tech Talk on the fourth Monday of the month. The next one is February 24th. And what that means is we will have either Tim or I, or probably we'll tag team, we will demonstrate a feature of sumApp that is either something new that we're rolling out and that we're excited about, or there are actually a whole lot of features that live in sumApp that nobody's using except for us, because they don't know they're there, and they wouldn't. How would they? Because it's not something anybody would be thinking to look for. So we'll be presenting those to get people using those cool features more. That will be like the first 2/3 of the Tech Talk, and then we'll open it up to questions. So our agenda for today, is greetings and review, which we just did, introductions, which we also just did. We're going to go through some really fundamental member management stuff in sumApp that you don't get in any other tool, and so you don't really think about until you run into the problems related to not having them. So I'm going to walk you through 4 things: merging members, showing and not showing toggles, my preferences, and the opt-in form. And then we'll open it up to questions, and then we'll wrap up, and then we'll close. And just like last week, or just like every week, we'll close at the top of the hour. And if you want to stick around and have a more informal conversation afterwards, you can. Okay, so Patty, I don't know if you've been in just for the record, we're sharing this for posterity. So if the people who are watching, if you have not seen, if you haven't been in sumApp, this is your project list, and I'm not going to go into what all the project list is and means right now, because we're going to go to manage members. But so the first thing that I was going to talk about was how you add members to a sumApp project, which I'm not going to go into all the ifs, ands, or buts of what it means, but the fundamental thing to know is that you don't have to, you can put people in a person at a time by hand here, but the quicker way is, if you've got more than a couple people, is to just click on choose a file and upload a CSV file that's been formatted correctly, which you can get here. The CSV file has to have a first name, a last name, and 1 email. And I just want to point out that you can have up to 3 emails per person, and that's relevant for a few reasons, and we'll get to it in a minute. Once you've done that, you can go to manage members, and this is what we basically call your member list. So here's the thing: we've loaded a list of names, and one of the things that happens frequently, what I wanted to show you was that, and this happens to lots of people, you'll be loading a list of members, and you've collated this list from a few sources, or maybe you took it out of like a MailChimp account, and you download it from MailChimp and you just put it into sumApp. But the thing that happens all the time that we keep running into is that most of us have more than 1 email address. So you might have a person, so for instance, Tim Hansen, who let's pretend he's a doctor. He's not, but Dr. Timothy Hansen, he signed up with his work account. He used a formal name for himself. He's got an email there, but then somehow we also have him with a less formal name and a different email account. Well, the reason I was talking about uploading names was because I wanted to say that when you upload a CSV list, sumApp will look to see if you're making duplicate members. So if I've got Kara in there 3 times with the same email, sumApp will only accept her email, that row of Kara once. It will be I think the last one is the one that will stick. And it will give you a message saying, you know, it loaded Kara from this row, but didn't load her from those 2 rows. So that, because what we want to do is not make 2 versions of the same person, because in a network map, that's messy. But if we've loaded like Tim, we did here with 2 totally different email addresses, sumApp just can't tell. There's no way that it can find that and fix that mistake. So what we've done is, and so if you're looking at your email, at your member list, before you launch it all, you might notice it and say, oh, that's no good. And you can just delete the extra person. You can also take the second email and put it, I could go and put it into here if I wanted to. And then sumApp would block it the next time around. So if you've got, if you're continuing to load data, you don't need to, like if you're continuing to add new names to a list, you don't need to take out the names that are already in sumApp in order to make sure no duplicates happen. It will just see, oh yeah, that person's in there, not loading them again. And if you've got 2 emails for one person and you add, and you put them both into the same person, then sumApp will block them from being loaded in separate rows. But once you've got it done, if you've already launched, this happens. I mean, so many people have had so many horrible stories about, like Katie Mammon loaded 700 names and about 150 of them were duplicates. And she didn't realize that until way after connections were being made. So then she had this total mess that she had to clean up by hand. And you might say, why does that matter? Who cares if there's 2 Tims? Well, it matters because if you're looking at a sumApp map or at a Kumu map, for instance, this is the list that I just showed you. We have 2 Tims, and as if that's not bad enough, I mean, we could just delete one, but then various persons have connected to Tim in various ways, not all consistently. So if we just delete this guy, then she's going to have to redo that. Oh, but we see, oh, she's already connected Tim there. But you have all this thinking and cleaning up to do. You can't just delete a person. You've got to go figure out all the connections. And either you're just going to tell your members, go redo it because I just deleted an extra Tim, but that's going to probably annoy people. So like what Katie did was she's probably spent hours replicating the links. And that was the point when I said, okay, we have to fix this problem. So we made this slick little merge function. So what you can do is click on Tim, on both Tims, click on with selected, click on merge members, and then you get this little window and it allows you to say, okay, which version of Tim do I want? I think he doesn't really go by Dr. Tim. We're just gonna click which version of each of these things we want. So we want his first email to be this one. It's letting me pick, though I can define which is gonna be the first and which is gonna be the second. We don't have a 3rd email, so that's fine. We didn't use segment here, so there's nothing to pick there. And then what we have to do is open up both of these bio links. So the first one, hang on. This is Dr. Tim's version. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and look at his survey, and then we're going to compare that to the survey of Tim Hansen, because what we have to do is we're going to select, we're going to have to delete one of the surveys because sumApp just doesn't have the capacity to move all of the survey data from one's responses and compile all of that. So here we see Dr. Tim Hansen's organization is Dr. Land. His title is Doctor Not Really, but then he hasn't done anything. Oh, but he did all this, he wrote all this text, which we know we don't want to delete because it'll piss him off. And, but he hasn't answered hardly any of the other questions. So let's go to the Tim Hansen version and we've got, oh, okay, we just need to, he's missing his title. and he's missing that text, so I'm gonna just put that here. But he's answered all these other questions. So this is the one I want to keep. I just want to go back and get his title and then put that in this version. And then I'm going to save it and we're good to go back to the merging. Okay, so now I'm going to say I want to keep this, the user 2 version of the survey, which is the Tim Hansen version. And then I'm going to say merge. Ready? Merging them. And then voila. We have one Tim Hansen with 2 emails, and we have all of his connections have been moved over. And if we go into here now, this is that guy. Yep, he's dead. And then if we go into here, oops, okay. We had a serious problem last week with sumApp, and so we're still sort of cleaning up some of the things that have come up from that. So that's another one I have to get fixed. But his survey is still here. And if we go to map, no, okay, because I guess the merge function just got broken a little bit. We'll get that fixed. But if I go here, now you can see that there's only one Tim, and he's got all the connections that he had. And there's he's got all of his survey responses there.
Cool. Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
How many people can you, how many copies can you merge? How many Tims could you merge?
Just two at a time.
Okay.
So you'd have to, if you've got 3 or 4 of them, you'd have to repeat yourself.
Okay. And then in terms of when it moved over the connections, is there any conflict? Are these outgoing connections that Tim has made? Yeah, these are connections that Tim has made from both places.
They're in both directions.
Both directions.
So the ones, so you can see the ones coming to him, just if they were going to the other Tim, they just got moved over to this Tim, and the ones going from Tim, whichever Tim they were going from got combined.
So if Junior Sarah had a connection to Tim and to Dr. Tim, and they were 2 different connections, you know, 2 different type of connections, what would sumApp decide?
It would take the most recent version of it.
Okay.
Assuming that's the most correct one. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I'm sorry it's a little bit broken, but it's been a week. Don't anybody go into software development if they don't have the stomach for serious nitty gritty. Next thing I wanted to show you was sometimes you have a situation where for various reasons, so here's a really common one that Tim and I do. Tim and I do a lot of maps for clients, and when we're just getting the map started, the first thing we need for Tim in order for Tim to start putting a map into Kumu is we need a bunch of data. We need a lot of replies and fields filled in and some connections so that he can, you know, a range of types of connections so that he can start putting in his code and making sure that everything's working and all the data's flowing through. And so often we, like, let's say Kara and Jim just hired us to make a map for them. We'll put Kara and Jim in as, you know, our beginning testers. And we'll also put Tim and me in because we'll just go in and throw a bunch of data in there. So then we've got 4 people in there and that's great. And we might want to keep Tim and me in there for you know, various reasons throughout the whole project, such as to test email sendings, to test just various, like if we're struggling with something, we're trying to figure something out, we can just play with our own data and not have to bother our client. But once we get the next people in, so let's say Kara and Jim were our client, and then Patty and Catherine are going to be the initial advocates, but Patty and Kathy don't even know who me and Tim are, and we don't want to get everybody all confused. So what we want to do is we want to leave Tim and I in there, but we don't want us to show up on the member tiles, or we don't want us to show up on the map. Or we might want us to show up on the map for 10 minutes while Tim figures something out, and then we might want to take us off again. And so what we do in that instance is, so Tim's here, we're just going to do this with Tim for now. We can click on the checkbox. We can do as many at once as we want. So we could do that. Let's do it with a couple people. So we've got 3 people we're going to hide right now. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to toggle visibility. So visibility, if it gets toggled off, means, so now we've got these minus signs, means these people are no longer going to show on the, hang on, on the connections panel. So there's no Tim, there's no Adrienne, there's no the other person. So we're not now just adding to the confusion of who's on this list and why. We're off of there. And then the other thing is we might want to say, okay, well, we're going to take, now we're going to make it so that we also, okay, so right now we're not showing on the member tiles, but they will still show on the map because they're being exported into Kumu. So, oh, see, they're still there. So now what we want to do is with these checkboxes, go to with selected and merge and toggle exportable. And now we can see that, oh yeah, I had put Michelle Obama in here as an example. Another, so that was one reason you might not want, yes, testing is one reason you might want to hide people. Another reason is, and this, I don't have there are ethical considerations in what I'm going to say next, but people talk about this all the time, and we made it possible for them to make their own ethical decisions about this. But within a network, sometimes, especially if it's a network that has to do with influencing policy, sometimes you'll do sort of an influence exploration, and you'll figure out, okay, let's pretend that this particular project is about girls and healthy food, and especially girls of color. And we eventually decide this is a project that Michelle Obama might be interested in. Now, she's not going to be part of the network, we know that, but she's an influencer in this realm, and it might be that someday we want to know if there's a way to contact her, that somebody knows her, or an influencer of smaller stature, but an influencer or a very well-connected person. And so we don't actually want to ask Michelle Obama to take the survey and to be on the map, but we do want to know if anybody knows Michelle Obama and how well they know her. So I'm going to put her back onto the so now Michelle Obama would end up in the member tiles. Oh, didn't do that. Did I get that right? I did not get that right. Okay. Anyway, I think you get the point. If now what we can do is we can have an internal awareness of who knows her. All of the people who know her probably don't want her on the map and for it to be publicly known, even in the network, that they know her, because anybody who knows high influencers also know that there's a certain gatekeeper role that they play, and they don't want to be inundated with people saying, introduce me to Michelle, introduce me to Michelle. So that might be a politically sensitive thing, but this is a way of at least asking the network who knows people that we might need to have a connection with at some point in time, or do need a connection with, and we're trying to find the best way to get connected to them. So those are some various reasons you might want to show or not show people either on the connections tab or in the map, and that's how you handle that. And you can, as I think you saw, you can sort to see who's connected or who's showing and who's not showing. The next piece of this is that I was gonna, so let me pause there. Any questions about that one? Okay.
Nope, that looks great.
I have a question. If so, when you're making them not exportable or not visible. Their data, their server data is all available to export or make visible at any time. So you've got the data, you're just controlling it.
Yeah. And you would actually, if you were, that's a good point though, if you were going to try it, like for instance, if you wanted to and those people might not even take the survey because you might not have even invited them. It might just be that you're looking for who knows them. But you would have to make them exportable before you download a CSV with their data in it. But, you know.
You have to make them exportable, and then if you populate them, hand populate them through a CSV, you have to make them exportable to populate them.
Not to populate them, but to export them. They're not exportable in any format, whether it's the link or the CSV. They won't come out of sumApp unless you make them exportable. So you would just temporarily turn exportable on and then turn it back off again. At a time when you didn't think people were poking around in the map, if you're using the live link. Patty, did you have something?
No, no, not at this point. Thank you.
Okay. So then once we got that functionality of showing, not showing, exporting, not exporting, we made a My Preferences thing, especially with people who are in Europe where there's the GDPR data, whatever protection thing. We need to be able to give people control over their data. And with that, it made sense to let them edit things as well. So, you know, how often we get people saying, oh, I got married, now I have another last name, or a hyphenated last name, or I want my name spelled differently, or there's a typo in my somewhere, or I want you to start using this other email. They can actually just go into My Preferences and change all of that themselves. But the other thing is they can also say, no, I don't want to be shown on the map. I don't want to be shown on the member tiles, and I don't want to get any emails from you. So they can do that themselves. And I'm just going to save this. This was for Errol, and show you what that looks like on the back end. So now we've got Errol has said no, and Errol's no looks like a big fat X. Our no looks like this little whatever minus sign in a circle. So now you can figure out, okay, if someone is not exporting or not getting emails or not showing on the member tiles, why is that? Is it that they said they don't want to, or is it that for some reason I turned them off for some reason and I could turn them on? So all of that is in My Preferences. We've got a couple changes that are coming to My Preferences, one of which is to just hide that entirely, because we have networks where funders are saying, I don't want them to be able to take themselves off the map. I don't have I mean, you know, that's an ethical question for me, but if they're funding a big program and they want them on the map, I'm not going to argue and say, I'll say you can figure that one out, but it's possible. So we're going to make it so that the My Preferences can be hidden, and hopefully nobody who has people in Europe will do that, but it'll be on them if they do. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to add to My Preferences the option to delete oneself entirely from the project. And then we will block them from being added back into the project on accident, so that to comply with the various data privacy laws. So those are coming. That's My Preferences and the toggles. And I will pause for questions before we get into the opt-in form. Anyone?
Did you say in the feature that's coming that somebody can delete themselves entirely from the project, but what did you say about them coming back?
Well, so Tim and I had this big discussion. It's like, well, just delete them. And I'm like, yeah, but if we delete them and I have loaded them from a spreadsheet that I am getting from somewhere else, there's nothing on the spreadsheet telling me that they deleted themselves from the project, and I'm just going to load them again, you know, and that's going to just really get everybody really annoyed if I just keep loading them every time I want to update my member list. So we will keep the email address and note that that member has deleted themselves from the project. So we'll delete all their data except for their email address, and then put a block on reloading that email address.
Cool.
They will probably still show up on the member list just with the email address, so that there's a link that if you did want to I haven't figured out the functionality for if they change their mind, but we're going to just assume they won't for a while. So that's that. Other questions about that? Okay. So the last thing, and I walked you through all of these things because some of them are preliminary to the opt-in form, which is where we're going to go now. Opt-in form. In the opt-in form, oops, that's not what I want. I want defining the opt-in form. Setup, define opt-in form. So the fundamental use of sumApp, and when we first made it, there was an assumption that you had an email list of people you wanted on your map, and you could load that list. There are a number of reasons why you might want to do that differently. And you might want to, so for instance, one of our clients is the coordinator for a network, which is a network of environmental activists in a part of the world where it's dangerous. It's really dangerous to be an environmental activist. And so she didn't even want to put them in the member list and not show them. She just wanted them to be able to say, I'll be on this map or not be on this map, because it was just a really big political issue to even make a map, because people were afraid of their relationships to others, to the more dangerous parts of the network being shown. So so for her, she has a list, she has the emails, she could just load them, but what she did instead was she sent the opt-in form and explained the whole how it worked. And then if they could just choose to even be in sumApp at all or not. So that's one way you could do it. Another way is like Jim has been doing with the Facebook project, where within a sort of constraint online environment, you just put a link and people can fill in the form and get on the map themselves. So this is the opt-in form. I'm going to come back to approval in a minute. It's very simple. You've got a header, you've got a body text, you can edit that. And then once you've filled in these fields, hit save, and then you have a link. Just click on the clipboard here and you get the link, and you can put it into, so you can put that link into an email or on a website, however you want to, wherever you want to put it. And this is what's going to happen is your users are going to say, you're going to fill it out. Hang on, which was I had messed something up. Okay, I think I'm just going to use, am I in that list? Sorry, I had this all figured out, but no, I'm not. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to send it to my email, and what it's going to tell me is that a confirmation code was sent to my email, and I have to go to my email, which I forgot to leave open. So there's the email. It's very simple. It just says, here's the confirmation code. So it's 9446. So I say, okay, put my 9446, oops. Into there, it says the code is correct. I can proceed. And now I click opt-in. This little thing here is just my browser adds this to pop up. So it's not a sumApp thing, it's a browser thing. But I can say, okay, I'm in the project. And what happens is now, so I'm in there, and it just sent me it sent me the initial invitation email, the same one that goes out in your first email blast to everybody. So you can see here, there's me. Let me just do it. And it says, yep, my email was sent and I'm exportable and visible. I'm just now a member and I've been invited. That's all you have to do. If you, do you want to, I'm going to go through the approval. Do you want to ask questions before I go through the approval process, or wait? I'm going to go. Okay. So that was the just do it without approving it process. It could be, however, that you want to approve people. You want to say, yes, I recognize this name. This is a Val. This is a person in our network. So sometimes you're looking broad and, you know, wide, and you're really open, and sometimes you're really focused. And if you're in a really focused mode, then you might say, let me approve the new members before sending an invitation. So now I'm expecting approval. And then the link is still the same, but when I fill out the form, I'm going to get, instead of getting, I will get the verification email, but the next thing I get is not the invitation email, but it will be a notice saying you're in the list and you have to be approved, and you'll get an invitation as soon as you're approved. So that means that if you're the administrator, you have to go in pretty frequently and approve the new members. One last thing about this is, okay, so this one is just if you know what an iframe is, you can use this for an iframe. If you don't worry about it. And then let's say that you started out going broad and wide, and you got so many people trying to be on your map that they're breaking it, or people are starting to get, they're starting to be like trolls, and it's just got out of control. What you can do is you can just click regenerate the link, and it will regenerate that code. And then everybody who has the old code won't work anymore. You can delete out the junk people, and then you can come up with a different strategy and a different approach and resend out the link, and you'll be good. Okay.
That's really useful. I've been worrying about how to, once you open up the opt-in link and you've got the world coming in at you, I didn't want to do approvals, but seems like that's a good way to throttle a balance between openness and closeness, and being able to reset it.
Yeah. So one of the things, Tim and I have done this, we've done this work with other tools, and our vision for making it a more iterative process from the start means that we have run into just about every problem that you could come up with, and we've had to figure out workarounds. And then once we figure out the workarounds, we do our best to incorporate them into the tool so that you don't have to spend, you know, months trying to figure out what's the best strategy. You can just say, okay, let's try this and see how it works. And if it gets out of hand, we'll just switch that. So we've just built in a whole lot of really not obvious, relatively not intuitive things you just wouldn't really understand until I actually, like, we walk you through it or you try it 5 times. But we tried to build in a whole lot of sort of safeguards and backups and ways of restarting and cleaning things programmatically. So this is one of them. I'm done talking. And so Patty or Catherine, do you have any questions about any of what we just went through?
This is Patty, and I don't really have a question. It's more of a comment. I feel like this is more of diving into the sumApp than, no, let me rephrase that. I don't know that I'm at this level with sumApp yet. I need to really get into it at more of a beginner's level. And so I was wondering, if I go to the sumApp webpage, is there a tutorial or something like that that's available on it to where I can really get oriented at a level that is very beginner oriented?
Oh, wait. Yeah, I'm going to share with you. Have you seen the, I'm just going to go there. We have a help desk that looks like this.
Okay.
I'm going to put the link into the chat box. We'll also put it in a follow-up email. And so here we have the knowledge base, which is, the knowledge base is mostly written by Tim and It's got videos and it's got articles. He tends to video, I tend to write. But it's got a lot of articles, especially about getting started. The getting started are both from the perspective of the visionary and the sense maker and the mapper. But then we also have, so the envisioning and sense making are more about process and facilitation and interactions with the network, and the mapping is all about the technology. And so we have a number of articles about sumApp. And
That's great. I think this is going to be really, really helpful. Thank you.
good. Another thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning, and I was going to, was if you are not a member of we also have a Slack team, and you can put questions in the Slack team, and the community is still small but getting more active. And so if you put questions in Slack, if you can't find something in the help desk, go to Slack. You can if you want to, and ask it there. And so if you're not in Slack and you would like to be, oh, wait a minute. I just realized I put that link privately to Kara and not to everyone. So I'm going to put it. So here's the link to, oh, now it's the, sorry, it's the, not the home page, it's the mapping page. If you would like to be in our Slack, you could put your email in the chat and Kara will invite you right now, or whenever we get around to it, whenever you get around to it. But even though you're just getting started, I think it's really great for you to watch these, be part of these conversations, because I mean, Jim has known about the opt-in, but there's things he didn't know about until just now, even though he's been working in sumApp for quite a while. It just, things are not that obvious. So you'll know when you get there what your options are. Other questions? Catherine, especially, haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I don't really have questions about that. I think that's a great option. One of the projects I'm working on, we're trying to find a way to make sure we get full representation. And so having an opt-in feature, I guess one of the issues that I'd be dealing with directly would be how to take that opt-in feature and turn it into like a paper form copy, and then be able to fill it out myself, like just to get the profile kind of thing. Where, what would the process be for that? Because to invite people is one thing, to have an opt-in online is another, but to have an opt-in sort of in paper to make sure nobody's excluded is another piece altogether that I think about and worry about, just to make sure that we are getting full representation. I'm specifically working in a food system project. So.
And so can you say a little bit more about the, what I think I'm hearing is that you want to be sure that you're also getting lists of who would want to be on the map?
Yes, and having a way to invite them that might, having a way to make it accessible to folks who might not have regular internet access, or things of that nature, but to still capture their data, or to still make it accessible to them. So, like,
yeah,
the opt-in is great because it widens the scope a little bit in terms of, like, if you have a website and people can find your website and then they can sign up. But there's this whole other layer that I struggle with right now, which is how to use this tool to not miss large groups of people who might otherwise not have access to these technologies.
Yeah,
that's a bigger question. I don't expect like a concrete answer to that, but it is something that I think about when thinking about the invitation process.
Yeah. Were you here last week when we talked about having like staff or somebody input a survey, like doing interview, like just face-to-face or on or phone interviews, and then having somebody input stuff into the survey?
I was not here, but I would be interested in that subject. Yeah, I would.
Well, just so there's a couple, let me just show you a couple things. so when we're in sumApp, these little link icon here opens up that person. So so Junior has his very own instance of sumApp, and that's always his place to go to add data or change data. And just pretend you don't see this because this is part of a new feature and I should have left that undone, but and I forgot to take it off. But so there, Drew, who's not with us, who I thought would be with us today, but Drew is in doing networks of immigrant communities in London,
Yeah.
and also disabled communities.
Yeah, that's the same kind of communities that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and they'll have community members, either like interns or staff, so you can just click on that each person's link, so they're in the list, and you can say, okay, I'm going to call Lucille, or I'm going to call Junior, or sit down with him at an event with my tablet and walk through the survey, and just he can tell me and I can answer, and I can say, okay, which of these issues, and then we get to the connections tablet or panel, and we just go through that with him and say, okay, we know you know you, so we're not going to ask you that one, but do you know Paula? And how well do you know Paula? Do you know? And so just, who are these people do you know? And once you've got people putting their pictures in, it makes it even easier. They can say, oh yeah, I recognize that face. I recognize that face.
Sure.
And then just go through. Yeah.
So the procedure would be, if I had some partners working with me to go and get that data manually, to just give them access to the sumApp login and show them how to get to that linked form just from the contacts list. And then they just can find the person, fill out the form alongside that person.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
With one caveat, you don't actually need to give them the login information to get in. You don't need to let them get into sumApp. You could just download the status report, because the status report also has, hang on. It has their link right here. So.
Oh, okay. So I could just give them access to the link that would otherwise only go to the member.
Yep.
Okay.
You can, another thing we do with the status report is we'll put the status report into a Google Sheet, and then we'll ask influencers in the network to we'll say, okay, please look and see. And you've got to have a fairly enthusiastic, some enthusiastic network members. But if you can say, who has not done anything, like they have made no connections, could you go in and so I'm looking at Adrienne, who's a friend of Adrienne's, could you just go copy the link and email her and say, hey, would you do this? We'd love to see you on the map. So, and they can even just put notes in here saying, I sent her blah, 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 I sent her a link on Thursday. So you can actually share that with people you trust to do the right thing with it. And they can just get the link from the Google Sheet.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Catherine, can I ask, so a lot of this participatory mapping is about the participants going into the map and using it and so forth. It sounds like working with people that have limited access, that the emphasis isn't on them in their using the map per se. How are you thinking about using the map?
Well, so it would be that we don't want them missing from the community that is using the map, despite the fact that they might not be ready users. Yeah. Right. So there's a difference there. Like in the food system, there's a huge community of people with great diversity. And so we don't want to exclude a whole faction of the food system in the network map for people to see and understand connections and things like that, just because some folks might not have English language, or they might not have digital empowerment. Right.
Yeah.
But so what it means is that the map is still mostly accessible to the people who have access, but at least everybody's on the map.
Exactly. And then, like we were just shown, there's a method or like a swift way to have, volunteers or folks supporting those groups to support various individuals in using the map, or getting, outreach to them in a way that could work. As just my experiences have been like, sometimes it just takes a lot of extra time to support the getting online things completed, and that's just a reality, but we don't want to exclude them just because of that.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just gonna, we're at the top of the hour. Catherine, you didn't hear this part, but we usually close at the top of the hour, but it's optional to stick around for another half an hour and just have open-ended conversations. So if you need to leave now, I want to pause and say thank you so much for joining us. And if you're going to stick around, I'll just give you a minute to decide which it is. And since it's only two of you, you can just say if you're going to stay or leave if you want. But it's the top of the hour, so
I need to leave. Yeah,
Okay.
this is Patty, and I do need to leave. And I want to thank you. And I look forward to getting into this deeper. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Glad you were here. Thank you, Patty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I would stay if you're available for a few minutes to talk about some specific questions that I've run into.
Sure. Yeah. That's
If
what we're
you're-
here for. Yeah.
Great. One of the biggest issues that I'm facing right now and trying to make a decision around, and I'll just preface by saying I'm working on two different mapping projects, both as a way for community, like both one of them is for a network of community food councils and mapping the food system, and another one is for potentially a larger scale project, as a way to get sort of living data for a broader connectivity with an economic analysis called net chain analysis. And so these two projects are similar but different in the sense that, we're going to want to use sumApp to collect this data to export and use and attach to other data and use for analysis, but we also want to, through the process of collecting that data, provide a useful tool to the folks who we're collecting data from. One is just, like I said, a general food, small local food system, and the other is more of like a statewide cooperative food system mapping. So like everybody who's engaged in the cooperative food system. So that one is quite a bit larger. One issue I've faced so far is the difference between individuals and organizations. And I was working with a gentleman who was doing some network, he's doing a doctorate up in Orno, and he and I were looking at the survey and trying to figure out a way, like in the survey, to disaggregate organizations and people, but the survey does not allow for any like logic. So we couldn't embed easily without, being like, if you're not filling this out on behalf of an organization, skip over to question 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
So we were trying to see if there was any thoughts or things you guys were coming up with. I figured out how to encode it so that I could, in the legend, represent individuals and organizations differently, and then I put a feature to help cluster individuals, a cluster command, or to cluster individuals around their primary organizations. So I'm getting like person to organization connectivity, but I need some sort of protocol for having like people filling out the same, or maybe there's the possibility to have two surveys connecting to the same map, one for organizations, one for people, that would have like linkable data or relatable data, but not.
You are talking exactly the same language that Tim and I have been buried in for the last several months. We are making we've just sort of accidentally, prematurely rolled out a new feature last week. We had a crash, and part of the recovery of the crash, it's a long story and I won't say more than that, but so we're in the middle of changing a bunch of things so that sumApp is stronger and better. But we have been working on doing precisely what you're talking about, being able to take an organization project and a person project so that you have 2 separate surveys, one for orgs, one for persons, and 2 separate connection sets, because organizations have different relationships to each other than people. And then, so that's actually when I said I forgot to take out a feature, this, yes.
Other connections.
And if you, let me see if if you want to look, if you want to like, well, I could sort of fiddle, I haven't gotten it all set up properly to make it easy to show, but what it would be is when you're linking the project, some people are going to have to do exactly what you said, which is fill out 2 surveys, one for themselves as a human being and one for an organization that they represent. And so we call those org reps in our new terminology that we've been inventing to make this feature possible. So if this person was an org rep, there would be the person project name here, and then there would be the organization project name would be right here, and they'd be able to click on the organization project.
Oh.
And in the organization project, they'd have a bio, a survey, and connections, and a map.
Wow, that's great.
And then this one, I don't think it's set up properly yet, but yeah, and there's nobody in there. But this one, what it enables us to do is have a 3rd connection panel, which is the relationship of people to organizations.
Exactly, because we tried to set up, I can share with you this table that we set up that had like person to person, person to organization, organization to organization, and like tried to figure out a typology for all those different relationships. And what we were, so like for our connections, we were able to come up with like, to keep it at like 9 options. We sort of had like affiliate, employment relationships, and like stakeholder or like partnership professional relationships.
Yep.
And we had those 3 categories crossed by the 3 frequency levels, like infrequent, basically a metric, Likert for like infrequent versus semi-frequent versus frequent. And so we were able to do that, but then it just seemed so cumbersome to try to explain, like, well, just like articulate all that, where it would be easier to have it be, separated out so that we could actually say, organization to organization relationships. Maybe that's not necessary. Maybe that's apparent in the people. But especially person to organization relationships, like have sensibility so that we could maybe measure those things a little differently and not have to try to cram it into the same box.
That's where I've been, and we'll even allow you to turn off the organization to organization connections if you don't need to know the relationships between orgs. So you can just have only people to people and people to org connections, but you can still get survey input about each organization. So everything you're saying, we have been anticipating because we've been through this a few times. And we had a client a while ago who absolutely thought they had to have what you're talking about, and insisted on trying it without us being ready, the tool being ready. And so we did what you talked about. If you're a person, answer these questions. If you're an organizational rep, answer these questions. And, like we had, like the connection tile was really long because there were like 12 questions, one for if you're answering as a person to an organization.
Yes.
But nobody put their data in the right place. The data was totally either, it meant somebody constantly cleaning it up, or it was just totally a muddle. And so that project was a total flop.
That's why I haven't launched yet before coming and talking to you, because I was, like, okay, I'm in the process of trying to, write this survey out. And I'm like, I just don't know if I should go forward with this.
I kept arguing that people are going to get confused, and they just kept adding more verbiage to reduce the confusion, which just didn't help. And
well, even getting it narrowed down as much as possible where it could make sense, regardless of type of connection, I still feel like it's confusing because, I mean, the terminology, it's not accessible. Affiliate versus employment versus professional. Those are the 3 kind of categories. an employment, with a connotation of there's like some sort of hierarchical, structure there, whereas partnership or I'm sorry, professional is not necessarily, it's more like if you're on the board of directors or something like that. So we tried really hard to try and figure out a really streamlined way, but I feel like the connection data is so important as a feature, and to do it justice, having it separated out like that would be great. So when do you think we could expect, and I don't mean to, put in pressure because I know these things take the time that they take, but when do you think we could expect, because I would happily wait to roll this out until that feature is completely ready. Just
Okay.
Back
So
end.
here's it's actually on the app, and I could quickly show you I could point you in the direction. I can't sort of walk you through all the variables but I could point you to it and you could start to play with it.
Okay.
Because it's there now. Now, as you saw, little things are broken. So actually, if you played around with it, it would be great, because then if you run into broken things, you could let me know and I could get them fixed as soon as possible. So I'm not guaranteeing it's ready, but it's certainly ready enough for you to start playing with and wrap your head around and get some prototype or pilot going. So I'll do that as I'm talking, as soon as I don't navigate and talk very well at the same time. So, but our next Tech Talk at the end of February will be about we call it the dual elements feature, meaning person elements and organization elements. So we'll be presenting it, and hopefully it's all working just perfectly by then, but we'll be presenting it next month. So you could start poking around, and then you could, okay, so I'm gonna just quickly, if you're interested, do you want me to quickly sort of show you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go over it with my colleague later today and let him know, and he and I might attend. We'll try to attend it, at least one of us in February, to maybe bring some of what we learn forward as well.
Cool.
Discussion.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Catherine, are you in the Slack? I didn't see your email before, so I could add you there if that would be quick to.
I believe I am in the Slack. Okay. I asked a question several months ago. I haven't been a regular participant, but I did go into the Slack, and you can add me in, and if you don't see me in there, but my email is kbessey@cdi.coop.
CDI.coop.
As in CDI, as in Cooperative Development Institute.
Okay.
You good, Kara?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, you're already in there, so.
Okay, so we've got 2 projects here, and I went into each of them. So first you have to, so let me just give you some background. Our plan, so we're not here yet. Our plan is to make it that you can have 1 person project linked to 2 organization projects, because you might want to be mapping organizations as well as smaller collectives such as projects or teams or things like that. So anyway, just because I'm a wacko, I wanted to be able to have 2 org projects connected to 1 person project. So just given the logic, the organization projects set up the connection to the person project. I mean, that just is easier technically. So so as you can see over here, this is a person and this is an organization project. And how I did that was I went to, first I go to define settings. And I go to, okay, let me back up. This is only doable in tier 4. So you need to have a tier 4 account. And you'll need 2 projects, obviously. So under project type, this is not a label. This is a functional distinction. And so you want to make 1 be a person project, and then make 1 be an organization project. And as soon as you make it be, let's go to person. I think I just broke the linkage. Once I go to organization, it gives me a list of all the person projects that I could link to, and I can select 1 of them. And then I go down here and I say save.
So that essentially defines the quote unquote organization lead, or whatever you called it, the organization keeper, or.
The organization defines the relation, defines the organization sort of claims its person project. Is
It's
that what you're
person
referring to?
Yeah, and its person project becomes sort of the keeper of that organizational data. In the
Yes.
managed member demo would be like a name of a person. It would be like
Yep.
so and so, and then by assigning them that organization, you're essentially inviting them to be the project, the data keeper of that organization for this platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll actually, let me finish walking you through this and it'll make, so I just defined a linkage. So now if I go back to my projects, and it was already there, but I'm just pointing out, if I had undone it, it would have, this icon wouldn't be there, but there is an icon there, and it tells us now that these two projects are linked. I'm going to go into, wait, I think I can get it here. So this is junior. I'm going to make junior be, I'm going to go back into the member list, the people member list. And now you can see, this tells us what phase we're in. We're in launch. This tells us that we're in the person project called Manage Members Demo, and it's linked to project organization 1. So you can see up here what's going on. If I go to manage members, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to get Junior's email address. We only play, aside from me and Tim, when you're looking at names in our demos, they're all fake names. We're not using anybody's real.
Fake.fk.
Yes. Okay, so now I'm going to go into, so junior is going to be a rep, an organizational rep. I'm going to go into, so now you'll see once I created that linkage, you've got 2 more options here, which we'll go into in a minute, but I just have to make a person. Well, I have to make an organization rep. And in this instance, it's going to be now, the organization is going to be called Networking Net. Okay. And that's, so Junior Sarah is Networking Net's organizational representative. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to make one more person, one more org. We have not, it's actually very complex the way the data comes out. And so we have not got it so that it's not saying first name and last name yet, but.
Yeah, so last name is basically the entry for the organization name, and first name is like a null field.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to put something in there, unfortunately, but let's call this one. And this one's, okay, so now I have 2 organizations in my list.
Oh, it does put the names, both names in.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that.
So one of the things that's going on with sumApp is we're gathering the data. I mean, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the way human beings can think and enter data, and then take the data and translate it in a way that Kumu can read it. And Kumu doesn't read first name, last name, it reads label. So we have to merge the first name and last name into the full name, and then we export it as label. So there's like a lot of extra things going on in the background that make the way we gather the data not as straightforward as it would be if you were just using a Google form. Okay, but so we've got 2 organization users. I'm going to go back into setup because I made the linkage. Okay, and that turned on these 2 options. One is manage linkage. And to manage the linkage, we could hide the org to org connections, but we're not going to at this point. We might say, this is a very brief field, so you have to be a little creative about how you make it. But you can edit that field, obviously. I'm going to come back to this and this, because I'm actually going deeper than I thought I would into the weeds here. But so when we check linkages, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, look at all the orgs and see if any of them don't have a representative. So Fakey org does not, but the other one does. And for now, we don't care. So I'm just going to say, okay, that's fine. I'll come back. They don't all have to have a representative before you can move forward. And then we're going to define the linkage options, which is the questions that go, and I'm just going to do that for now. I'm going to do one more thing.
Oh, so this is on like a separate survey.
A separate connection survey. So we don't have an entity, we have 2 entity surveys, but we have 3 connection surveys.
Okay.
So the entity surveys are the individuals and also the organizations.
Yeah.
And then the connection types are between people,
Yep.
between person and org. What's
Yep.
the word? Org and org.
Yep.
Okay.
So you're showing me here that you can set up connection options in much greater detail than what I currently see. It's just the ability to put kind of like linear, nominal connections.
Yep. So let's say,
Catherine, are you using tier 4?
We have, I think, tier 2.
Yeah.
Is that where I'm not seeing that the
yeah.
options?
So this functionality is only in tier 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But multiple questions on relationships come up in tier 3 or above.
Yep.
Okay.
So you can ask multiple questions. You can have one of them being on a gradient, a spectrum like this, ranked. You can ask full text questions like describe your relationship.
Okay, so
yeah, I was not aware that this.
Yeah, you don't have this degree of you don't have the multiple question options in tiers 1 and 2. You have multiple question options in tiers 3 and 4. Okay, so but this is what it looks like in tier 3 and 4 in the connections. These again, what we just did was we generated the linkage questions, or the person to org questions. Okay, so now I think that if everything works right, click on Junior. So now we can see here, when this one is clicked, Junior, we would change the text everywhere to make sure that it's very clear. Junior, this is about you as a human being. This is you as a human being. This is you as a human being. And then this is your personal relationship with other human beings. And then here, we would be saying, we'd be making it very clear. So I just said, come back to this, but we would say, this place is where you as a human being get to say how you relate to this organization.
Oh, that's so great.
And every human being who is invited to sumApp gets to say how they're related as a human being to the organization. Then, but Junior not only has a personal, like I'm the founder and a staff. Oops, I set that up wrong. I should make it, I could have not limited to 1, and I should have not limited to 1 given the questions that I asked. But so Junior might be the founder of this organization. He might be on the board of this organization, but he's still answering as himself, not as the organization. But we also want him as the founder and the ED to answer questions about the organization. So there, Junior would go to here, and in this place, you would make it very clear, you are answering as the representative of your organization. This survey is about your organization, not you as a human being. So put your logo here, not a picture, etc. And then you would have different questions here, which are about, the organization, not Junior as a person. And then you could turn this off if you didn't need it, or you could keep it on where you're asking the relationship between your organization and other organizations in the network. That was a lot of words.
That's great.
That's great.
I had no idea you were so far along.
Yeah, that is great. I can't wait for that.
It's there.
It's
just
there.
it's just
And
a
we
little
just have
buddy.
to get the new tier. I have to figure out how, to, who's going to buy it.
Yeah.
Basically, could it be my organization or yeah, because it's a collaborative project that I have here right now. But then I just have a really quick technical question that came up while I was looking at that I remembered, which is like when you do have a select multiple options on a survey question in all of this, in the code, you know, what is the, in Kumu, you know, what is the, in the syntax, the way to, do you just, when you extract so that you can create a filter or a connection indicator, do you just, you know, like contains the word, or, you know, how do you disaggregate that in the syntax when you, because I know in surveys in general, it's hard to get sort of like the, you get the condensed versus the expanded data, but then how do you take the, you know, multiple, the check all that apply kind of questions and turn them into single answer?
Okay.
I don't know if that's really.
So so this is one of the things that sumApp just does for you to make it easy. So if you've got a check all that apply, so in this instance,
yeah,
like that, it just sumApp puts pipes in between each response, and a pipe is what Kumu requires in order to treat it as multiple choices. So once there's pipes, then sumApp will, or Kumu will, you know, do a carriage return and treat each one separately. And then in, if we, in the, so let's say we're going to decorate an element. Oh heavens. So we want to decorate selected elements, and we want to decorate them. Oh my, change size. How come it's not letting me select? Oh, I see. I did that wrong. Decorate elements, not select, not similar, but decorate a custom selection, and then it just drops down. And so here you've got, what do you want? You know, is, isn't, contains, is less than.
Okay,
great. It's going to treat each of those options within a pipe as a separate thing.
Yeah, I was noticing that it was working in my filter tag that I created, but I didn't know exactly why. So thank you, that helped. And the pipe, it's like, you know, the syntax is very much like R.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, but that's when I say like we're asking human being questions, and then we're translating in the background, we're translating that into Kumu language so that Kumu will read it and do what you want. So that what we're trying to do is make it so that if you're not an SNA expert or an R expert, you can still do these maps. You don't have to be like a data nerd, like some of us used to be. So, yeah.
And now you can decorate by element type, whether it's organizational or individual or person rather.
Yeah, so now Tim and I have not yet had a real project using sumApp data for dual elements. So I have no doubt that we will soon have an opportunity, and there will be all kinds of custom selector, filter, partial view kind of behaviors that Tim will have to figure out how to perfect them to suit people's needs. So I'm sure he will be doing lots of testing.
That's very cool.
Pretty soon.
One last question, and I don't want to keep you all day because I know you guys are really just grateful for your time, but one big question that I have is like, when we export the data, like say you had this, what you're showing me like in full, and you had like tons of people from the food supply chain, you know, all with their connections identified, which could include things like, you know, economic relationships, basically. How would then that data, like when, because I know it goes in through a JSON from sumApp to Kumu, like when you export that out of Kumu, what is there's like an ID or some field that helps to relate the connection data to the survey data, or how do you structure the aggregate data set?
We do this, okay, so I'm not going to show it to you in the JSON link because it's a little more confusing. Oh wait, this is the wrong one. No, it's not. Hang on. We structure it the way it needs to be structured, basically. sumApp does. So, oh, and so there's this is what I was going to show you. Hang on. Do it
Oh,
this
so
way.
it's, you can download multiple lists here.
Yeah, you can get so these ones, if you want to look at your data or if you want to manually load it into Kumu for some reason, or manipulate or use it for other purposes, you can download. So this is just a member list. This is the combined member list is the two. So if you just want if you just want persons or you just want orgs, you'll just go to the project and get the member list. If you want the combined, both orgs and persons, then you'll get the combined out of the person project. So likewise with connections. But these are all, you can just download them and fiddle with the data yourself. And then the link will go right into Kumu. But what I was going to show you is, so here we've got the two, it's got the type now is set by that thing we put in the settings.
Oh, perfect.
You've got the label, and there's and so this is there's an element ID number for every element that comes out of sumApp.
That connects to the connection.
Yep. So if we go here,
great.
Yeah.
So that could be the field you could join them by in, like, if you were to just be wrangling the data in another program.
Yep. So, you know, we've got, so the connection has its own ID, but this is from, so you'll see like Junior's. So this is all, these are all his element ID.
Okay.
And then, you know, Benny's, so it's the from and to's.
A range of element IDs. Okay.
Yep. A caveat to just to put out there, right now, it's not too hard to get to the point where you have too many members or too many connections to actually load well in Kumu. So Kumu will start to time out. And we have situations where, especially if you're time tagging, which is a whole nother topic, but time tagging adds more data, but you can then show snapshots in time of your network changing, which is really cool. But it adds a lot. Pardon me?
That is really cool.
Yeah, but it adds a lot of data, and we already have situations where if we try to use the JSON link and put it into Kumu, there's so much data in that JSON link that the browser times out, and we can't get the data out of sumApp into Kumu using the live link. We're working on I mean, that requires a whole overhaul of our underlying infrastructure, which we're sort of inching towards, but I'm just telling you that you sounds like have the potential to run into actual just hard limits on data quantity in your larger project.
Yeah.
Depending on how carried away you all get with the fun bells and whistles. So.
So simplicity is our friend. But also, I mean, I guess, you know, you could like capture a certain amount of data, and is there any way to filter or screen what you do export over to Kumu, so that like you could capture all that data still, but you're only making visible certain cross sections of it?
So there's all kinds of workarounds depending on your technical chops that you could try, that we do, Tim does. So the answer is, yeah, you maybe, but you'll get to a point where it won't, the JSON link just won't go anywhere. And so then you'd have to start using the CSVs anyway, until we break this constraint. So that's our big constraint right now, is just the how to deal with Kumu and how to deal with too much data.
I feel like the analytics that we'll do with the data captured are not going to be, we're not going to do in Kumu. But that Kumu, we'd want to have, you know, retain access to all of the important data for the users to play with and visualize and, you know, do gap analysis, just like visual gap analysis with, and, you know, find, oh, this person has this skill set. Like we're trying to set up like a skills had versus skills needed system, so that users can easily, you know, use the map to identify where there are gaps and where there are certain talents. But then the other data would be like really just irrelevant. A lot of it, like some of the connection data in particular, would be irrelevant to the users, but we'd still want to capture it. And in that case, because that data might be some of the best for the analysis.
Right.
for like the real gap analysis and what we're looking at doing, which is called this net chain analysis, which I'm going to be learning how to do, and but I'm not exactly sure how to do it yet. But yeah, so two different purposes and functions for sure: the data capture side and the user
Yeah.
side.
And you can, so if you've got, when you start doing time tagging, that's when you're really going to run into trouble. But we do offer this project that I'm showing you here doesn't have time tagging, so you can't see it, but you have a choice of using a link that includes the time tag data or that doesn't include the time tag data, so that you could, hypothetically, you could just, for your users, you could just show them the current data, and then for your analysis, you could be using the time tag data. So that's trying to make it possible to
Okay,
slice and
yeah.
dice. Yeah.
That, and as long as I kept it, simplified enough in its entirety, probably the browser would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just go back and mine from the time tag data when I extract to do any analysis outside of the programs.
Yes.
Okay.
And so as I'm hearing you talk, and I'm thinking that you're working on doing net chain analysis and learning that, I'm inclined to say, when you get there, would you be willing to come back and share your learnings with in a deep dive conversation or with the community of practice in one way or another?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a project that we're working on for a bit of time. But I will certainly come back and share every step of the way and try to be more connected with these tech talks as we start to really delve into using this resource. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and support.
Yeah, well, we're happy to be, Tim and I have been like doing this work often without a whole lot of people who get it, or so just it's nice to have real customers who really want it and who understand it. So that makes me happy. So thanks for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited about it. I mean, living data, it's like, whew, not, whoa, it's amazing.
Christine, just a quick question on that. Without the JSON links, can you use these download files to pull time tag data into CSVs?
Yeah, there's no time tags in this project, so you're not seeing.
But if there were,
there would be a little checkbox behind each CSV saying include time tags or don't include time tags, and there would be extra JSON link options.
But what I mean is you could then pull the CSVs. It would include time tag data.
Yep.
And you wouldn't have the bottleneck of the JSON link to worry about.
Right. Yep.
Wow.
Now you know why I'm cranky all the time.
No, but I know why you're excited now too. Thanks, Catherine, for provoking this.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This is
well,
wonderful.
it was good for me to have a little mini quick dry run too, because I can tell this is going to be, sometimes it's hard to talk about like in a way that everybody can follow. So thanks. Okay. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation this morning. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll certainly be in touch. And yeah, thanks so much for what you've developed here. It's really, really fantastic.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. We'll catch you next time.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. Bye.